Okay, so this is our second video, 5E Inquiry Lesson Plan Reflection. So we're going to talk a little bit about reflection on the lesson plan and reflection on the lesson presentation. On the plan itself, I feel like I went on a fair amount of that into the first video. Advantages, I think obviously it's inquiry based. I feel like it's inquiry based. You'll tell me if you think it's inquiry based or not. But I feel like we had two really good hands-on phases where they're evaluating the wicking material and then designing and constructing the lamps themselves. I felt like those were two very good inquiry pieces. Plus, it was really free form. Both in the, I gave them a fair amount of leeway as far as how they wanted to design their own experiment around the wicking, and that went fairly well. I mean, this is still relatively new for them. I don't think anybody in their science career has ever, they've done labs, but I don't think anybody's ever had them design their own labs and design and be accountable for determining their own independent and control variables. So it's a little slow, and they struggle a little bit with it, and they still struggle with dependent and independent variable and those definitions. But all in all, they did pretty well with it, and they're getting better every single time. And they're being very thoughtful. And like I said, I think I mentioned in the last video, one of the groups came up with a really creative solution for determining the uptake of the oil, of weighing the wick prior to and afterwards, which I thought was very creative because I was expecting a lot of time and distance kind of inquiries. So I think I think it was really inquiry based, and I think that pushes them. I think the core thing with inquiry based education is that it pushes them to deeper levels of learning and understanding. Because when you don't have those parameters around you, when you can't follow the lab like a recipe, it forces you to really think critically and dive into the knowledge, and I think it also keeps kids more engaged than if they're just following a set of procedures. They have to create it themselves. I think they have more buy-in, and at least higher levels of engagement. What inherent benefits does your lesson plan provide for students with special needs and English language learners? So this is really interesting. Our student population is probably 90% free and reduced lunch, and when I looked at our reading scores, DRG scores, DRP scores, I forget now, but for the last that I had for them, 10th grade, I would say maybe only 25% of my kids were on grade level, and about 70%, 75% were below, and that ranged from 6th grade, 7th grade reading level on down to 2nd and 3rd for a couple kids. I think whenever I'm doing anything, I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking a lot about minimizing reading as much as possible, or allowing kids, if we do need to do some reading, to read in groups or read out loud. That's what we did with the oil lamp history article that we had, which was really kind of the one big block of reading that we had. That was ended up they could read that in groups and talk about it. So that helps there. So I try to minimize the solo reading. I try to pair kids. All my lab groups are mixed. Or heterogeneous groups based on reading level. So I always, at the very least, try to have a high reader, a low reader, and then two people in between to provide those supports. I don't actually have anybody who's an EL learner. Currently, everyone has exited out, but as we all know, that just because you exit out of EL doesn't mean you have mastered proficiency and fluency. So, I obviously don't group those kids together, spread them out around. It's the nice thing about this model is that there's a lot of hands-on activity and ways for people, if they who might be struggling with the written content, they have some really good practical demonstrations of the content in real life, actually working by watching the wicks wick and watching the lamps burn. I mean, they're seeing that, and so there's ways that they're getting around the reading comprehension piece. And so I try to do as much as possible that is hands-on like that, or if we do need to push kind of new content in a non-experimental way, I'm trying to do videos and online virtual labs and modeling and things like that to kind of really try and stay away from the hard reading, and also by varying the stimulus and trying to hit all the different learning styles for kids. What was easy about planning in the entire 5E lesson? What was difficult? I think these are fun to do. So it's actually really engaging as an instructor to design these, because it's a lot of fun, and the kids are going to have fun. So that piece is really good. I think I need to get better at my time management. Only in my second year of doing this, I still don't have a really good sense of how long things are going to take. I'm always trying to make sure that I'm front loading the right amount, so that I'm not boring. Now, if I'm doing too much, I'm boring the kids and I'm losing them. I want them to stay engaged, but I need to give them enough information so that they have enough, they know what they're doing in the lab and why that they're doing it. And so sometimes I go either way on that. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to make sure is to try and hit that sweet spot of, know enough to be engaged, but not bored. Obviously sometimes, especially with slow groups, you want to jump in and say, well, no, your independent variable, in this case, is going to be time, because that's how you set it up. Struggling not to do that and just sort of ask kind of probing, kind of Socratic seminar sort of style questions, and trying to get them to come to the knowledge themselves. So I think that's what I need to work on, is those things. The content knowledge is fine, and I have good classroom management. So the basics are down, but I think it's kind of that idea of having a sense of how the lab's going to play out and where the sticky points are going to be, so that I can sort of preempt that for the next time I do this. For the lesson itself, I think we had a good hook. The capillary action videos were kind of interesting, not quite as interesting as when we were crushing railway cars for talking about pressure, which we did that one too, the same one we watched in class. But they seemed to really enjoy it. I think one thing that I need to do next time for the prep and planning, and this will go into changes too. So one thing is the timepiece. I should have done this myself first, and then tacked on some time to see how long it would take, because I underestimated the time it would take them to plan their experiments. And so in the first period class, I actually had them try to design the experiment and execute the wicking piece in the same 50-minute period, and that didn't work at all. That was a total miss. But that actually ended up working out really well. So I adjusted that from the periods then forward. I had them just do the design piece and do the physical piece of it the next period. But that mistake counteracted my other major mistake, which was, and why I should have done this myself in advance of the lab, because in order to make cleanup easier for the wicking piece, I decided that we wouldn't for the wicking piece, we weren't going to set anything on fire. So instead of using oil, I would just use water. I'd have the kids use water with food coloring. I thought, it's going to be easier to visualize than if we use olive oil, which would be the traditional oil that they would have used, in the Greek and Roman times for these lamps. So I thought we'll just use water and we'll food color it, and that's going to make it really easy for them to see the wicking uptake on the wick, and it's going to be great. But that's the other thing I found out from the first period class, is the wicks were not taking up the water at any appreciable rate. And so having the 1 day delay let me switch over to oil for the other classes. And so it's just something I should have done in advance. I mean, I know conceptually, right, if something is optimized to for uptake of nonpolar molecules, it's not going to necessarily uptake polar molecules the same way. And I get all that in the chemistry piece. I understand that. But I guess I sort of assumed that was kind of NASA level materials optimization, right? Where if you're spending a ton of money to do that, that there'd be a huge difference. I honestly didn't think that there would be a huge difference in uptake of a water versus oil from a $5 package of wicks that you get from Hobby Lobby or Michaels, and I was wrong. There was a huge difference. So that was I underestimated that, and that was something that for the next time that I need to well, for this one obviously, and we're gonna run our prototypes with oil for the wicking test as well as the lamp itself, because it didn't uptake the water, and then just for a in a broader sense, I need to probably, on things that I haven't done before, I need to run them myself, and not just assume that I have enough background knowledge to do this, so that I don't get caught in a scenario where I'm not getting behavior that I expect. So that, and then the time piece. So running it ahead of time, and then allowing for more time, and making sure that I'm allowing the kids enough time to really make the most out of the inquiry and not rush them. But like I said, I adjusted after first period, and then for first period I had to redo the second day with oil. So there was ended up not being any negative impact, but I just tried to play a little fast and loose on the prep, and I shouldn't have done that. So those are also the changes that I think we would have made. I think the most surprising or interesting thing was how really into the kids got into the design of their oil lamps. They wanted them all to be unique. They wanted more clay. They wanted to do more elaborate designs. They had really a high level of buy-in. I mean, obviously I expected them to have buy-in because that's kind of the intent behind the 5E lessons, but they were really into it. And so I think that they're also not super careful around fire, which you would think that they'd have that by 16, 17 years old, but they're trying to, put the wicks out with their fingers, and one of them tried to smoke the vapor from the olive oil. So a couple changes I would make. Maybe give them even more time and more materials to design their kind of ultimate lamp. Maybe that ties into kind of the phase 2 idea. Maybe I actually have them do a second lamp once they figured out the lessons from their first lamp. Instead of writing it up in a reflection, maybe I just have to say, okay, now what? Great, let's do a second version of your prototype because you realize all the mistakes you made. Let's do another one. So that could be good. And then, just trying to keep kids from doing stupid stuff is always a challenge. You think at 16, 17 years old they're past it, but no, they are not. All right, so I think I've said everything that I wanted to say about the actual implementation of the lab. It went well. They liked the videos. They liked designing the wicking experiment. They did a good job with it. They loved designing the lamps. I just need to give more time and make sure that I've sort of practiced this in advance so that I'm fully aware of what the results are going to be in advance, so that I don't just assume that you can... a $5 Michael's pack of wicks will uptake water as well as it will oil, because it doesn't. Not even close. And I'm an idiot because I know better than that. But oh well. Next time.